Very good morning. Here today we have Dr. Suvendu Das. We welcome Dr. Suvendu Das to IIMT Open House. He is an expert in various domains. So let me introduce briefly to the audience. Dr. Suvendu Das is a people management expert, spiritual scientist, life transformer, thought therapist, mind measure, professional trainer, inspirational speaker, mentor, and author. Currently, as the founder and managing director of Hiteshi Consulting, he is leading the consulting practice in the area of people strategy, IR, employee relation, organizational change, learning and development, CSR, talent management, legal services. He advises and guides industry in designing programs, interventions, supports all interactions and intervention for the MSME, large and mega industry in the public, joint and private sector. He has already served as Group President, HR, OSL Group, Vice President HR, Paradeep Phosphate Limited, Deputy General Manager, P&A, Steel Authority of India Limited. Dr. Das is an alumnus of University of Delhi and IISWBM Kolkata with more than 39 years of experience in national corporate training and learning. He has handled and managed HR, IR, L&D, CSR, corporate communication, corporate affairs, legal portfolio in different organizations, small to big and mega manufacturing, process, mining, service, healthcare, hospitality organizations of repute. He is a certified lead auditor in IMS, a certified psychometric analyst from Prism International, and professional trainer on human behavior, etc. He has trained more than 40 corporate managers in India. He has designed and conducted several organizational surveys on employee engagement, internal customer satisfaction, organizational health and climate, impact assessment, customer feedback, productivity enhancement, etc. He is a seasoned practitioner in OD, organizational design, management of organizational values and ethics, competency framework, PMS, employee engagement, learning and development, IR strategy, executive coaching, mentoring, etc. are high core strength. He is an empaneled expert resource person for TISS Mumbai, National Productivity Council New Delhi for various MDPs. He is a sought after inspirational speaker and rapporteur in many professional fora. Dr. Das is a life member of National Institute of Personal Management, National HRD Network, Indian Society for Training and Development, and Indian Industrial Relation Association. Dr. Das was awarded the Conference Fellowship of NIPM at Cochin for the year 1993. He has several professional and literary publication to his credit. Dr. Das has also served as a member of National Board of NHRD Network, Vice President of Odisha State Productivity Council, member of HR and IR Subcommittee of CII Odisha and CII Eastern Regional Council, Honorary Secretary of NIPM, Utkal Chamber, Executive Committee member of Utkal Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He is also a member of SAQS accreditation team of ADISA. With this, I welcome Dr. Das to this virtual talk of IIMT Open House. We have heard that negotiation is a skill. However, the HR expert tells that it is a technique. So today we are going to listen the art and science of negotiation. So with this, I welcome. The platform is yours, Dr. Das.
Thank you, Professor Srikant. It's been a great pleasure to be associated with you in making your team aware, your faculties and students aware about the art and science of negotiation. As you all know, in life, the day we are born till we exit the world, everything is a negotiation. Even a newborn child negotiates with the mother by crying, attracting towards him or her to get the feed, to get attention. So everything is a negotiation. And as you all know, negotiation is such a term, even when you are going in a traffic, when you get stuck in a traffic, you always try to negotiate through a traffic to get the way forward. So negotiation when we talk of negotiation, only the commercial negotiation or in the business world, we come across that. But it's not so. Even if we negotiate within our family, within organization, within institution, the faculties also negotiate with the students to get their attention and get learned also. So everything is a part of negotiation, I would say. So I will take you through a PowerPoint as to explain you what is the art and science of negotiation. Right? So during this short time, we will try to take you through what the concept of negotiation, how to understand it, and its importance in our day-to-day business life. We will also try to understand the various alternatives to negotiation, and also what are the negotiation conflicts and what are their importance in our day-to-day life. What are the 4 elements of principal negotiation? How neuro-linguistic programming prepositions are there, which helps in effective negotiation? What are the planning and process of negotiation? And what are the different tactics of negotiation using the NLP approach also? And ultimately, we'll try to understand what are the possibilities of having or not having a settlement through the negotiation process. So without wasting much of time, let me ask you, what do you understand by negotiation?
Yes. We usually, whenever we face difficulty, we thought of doing some kind of negotiation. So that's all we know about it.
Yeah. When you face any challenge or any situation which you had never conceived of, you have not thought of, and you see that the way you wanted, nothing is happening. So you try to negotiate and try to bring the opposite party or the person to your framework or to your area of strength so that you have a meeting ground together, right? So if I tell you this statement, I wouldn't dream of telling you to stick to the principal negotiation all the time. And there is no way I would suggest that you can change easily. So I promise everything I say, you will want to hear, which means you can let down your guard and relax as you let me help you achieve your goals. So if you go through this statement, do you think that from the standpoint of where you are, from the position of adamancy, from the position of firmness, you will gradually, slightly move forward and be willing to change easily, so that if you are willing to hear from me, that means you are letting down your guard so that I'll be able to help you. So that is the initial stage of bringing some person to a negotiation table. So what is a negotiation? There are many authors which have defined negotiation. So without wasting much of time, I will just try to quote one or two. For example, Walton and Maccarthur, they defined negotiation as the deliberate interaction of 2 or more complex social units which are attempting to define or redefine the terms of their interdependence. So here you see the term interdependence, complex social units, and the attempt to define or redefine their terms. Gottschalk, he defined negotiation as an occasion where one or more representatives or two or more parties interact in an explicit attempt to reach a jointly acceptable position on one or more divisive issues. So there are issues which are divergent, okay, and ultimately they attempt to reach jointly acceptable position. Similarly, Michael Salomon, he defined negotiation as the interpersonal process used by the representative of management and employees or unions in an organizational context, of course, within the various arrangements of collective bargaining in order to resolve their differences and reach to an agreement. So this shows that negotiation is the process of finding an agreement that is satisfactory to all the groups or parties or individuals who are involved in the negotiation process. It is ultimately to ensure to a win-win situation where no party loses. And negotiation is best when it includes the members in conflict and peers who are the stakeholders in the negotiation processes. So ultimately, negotiation is a process for resolving conflict between two or more parties where both or all modified their demands, initial standpoint, ultimately to achieve a mutual acceptable compromise. That's a negotiation. Negotiation is prevalent everywhere, as I said in the beginning, from the cradle of birth to the deathbed, everything is a negotiation. We are in an age of negotiation. Everywhere you see, whether you talk of nations, nowadays you see the Russia-Ukraine war, the tension between China and Taiwan, okay, the European nations. Everywhere in the world you'll find there are a lot of negotiations going on. There are negotiations between governments, negotiations between employers and employees, unions and management, husbands and wives, parents and children, faculties and students. Everywhere you'll find everything is a negotiation. It's a part of our life. Question is, who negotiates for what? If you see a commercial situation, there are buyers and sellers who negotiate about the price, about the delivery terms and conditions. There are debtors and creditors who negotiate about the rate of interest, the period of payments, other things also. Between the political parties, you'll find negotiation between the ministries to be allocated, who are going to get what constituency when the tickets for the elections are there. Recently, you must have come across the by-election in Dhamra area, where one of the persons of Biju Janata Dal, when he was not given the ticket, he stood for as a candidate, independent candidate, and there were negotiations between him and the BJD also, right? So everywhere you find a situation of negotiation, and between nations, there's a negotiation between territories, trade, aid, and terrorism. And about the territory, the live case of Russia and Ukraine war is a live example. In the organizational context, negotiations take place where there is a dispute between labors, which is very visible. There are commercial disputes, which are normally less visible and more frequently it takes place. And the term of negotiation are increasingly used among the interest groups, among retailers, among the various community action groups. Between the marriage also, it's a great negotiation process. Whosoever has gone through the marriage, or who are already married, they know it much better than others. And those who are bachelors, I'm sure you will be going through this negotiation process when the time comes. Even after marriage also, if you have an incompatible couple, then divorce also is a great negotiation process. And especially when it comes to giving alimony to get the divorce, that's a tough negotiation process. And there are a lot of negotiations going on day in and day out between husbands, wives, lovers, and everything. And those of the students, whosoever you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, I know you must be negotiating day in and day out to keep your other partner happy. If there is no negotiation, what are the alternatives? The first is If you do not negotiation, then you yield to dictatorship. Okay, of course, in certain circumstances it is preferred, but not always. And in dictatorship, the decisions are made unilaterally. The other party surrenders their own rights, and the consequences are very fearful. Okay, right or wrong, everybody tries to accept the might of the dictator, and such decisions are far more common, especially in military or in a sports situation. Other one is an arbitration, where the preferred negotiation fails, then there is a designated third party who tries to facilitate or makes decision for other two parties, which will be binding on both them. But arbitration may not work always, and among most negotiators, it is not very popular. So there has to be some proximity to decision by dictatorship, or what you call the pendulum arbitration. Other alternative is persuasion, which is the most common alternative, where one party tries to persuade the other to accept their point of view. And always in any process, it is the first thing everybody tries to, and keep on trying throughout the process of negotiation. And experience shows that through persuasion, the success rate is very less. And ultimately, there is a feeling of frustration, and people in the conflict, they can be hardly persuaded to accept unilaterally the other person's or other party's point of view. So whenever there is a negotiation, there is a conflict, because conflict leads to negotiation. And in a democratic setup of like ours, everybody has a right to differ. What are the different perceptions? It can be the conviction of your own point of view that you are always right, or it can be the lack of understanding or inability to use the same facts or arguments to arrive at a conclusion, and in the process you lose a lot of time. But there is a deliberate introduction to conflict in a negotiation, where one of the party might want to improve on other's offer, even if a deal has agreed also at times. So negotiation conflicts, in what happens there are two parties where there is a genuine gap between their expectations and controls. For example, if a flight is delayed due to fog, there results in a lot of major contract. You are traveling and you are supposed to reach at a certain point of time to sign a contract. And if the flight gets delayed, you lose the contract. What will happen? You are incurring a huge loss. Similarly, consequential reduction of work available in a company because of redundancy, there is also a lot of gap. So whenever there is a conflict in a situation like where you enter into negotiation, there are basically two factors which affect the self-interest. One is the corporate aspect, and second is the individual or personal aspect. So one has to see which aspect you can ignore if you really want to negotiate in a conflicting situation. And at times you agree to disagree also. That's also an art as to when and where you have to agree to disagree. There are basically two types of conflicts where negotiation takes place. One is the conflict of interest, and other is the conflict of rights. In the conflict of interest, here the terms of business have not been settled. That means it's not clearly defined in the beginning. And subsequently, it's being renegotiated where initially you had come to some kind of understanding. For example, I would like to mention here that the labor negotiations, which takes place in an organization setup, in a business organization, on wages, hours of work, number of people to be engaged, or working conditions, there's a conflict. Similarly, in commercial negotiations also, on price, quantity, quality, other aspects, you have a negotiation conflict. Whenever you talk of conflict of rights, there is always a difference in interpretation which arises about the existing agreement. And here, whatever has been agreed or settled how it will be implemented, how it is going to be executed, there also lies a difference of opinion. Similarly, in a commercial negotiations also, whether the terms and conditions of the existing contract have been met or not, there also lies a conflict. Whether one party fulfills its obligation under the contract or not. If not, was it entirely their fault, or did the other party also contributed to also? If yes, then how much? So there are many aspects where there is a conflict of rights. So when you try to arrive at an outcome to the negotiation process, you should ask yourself that what am I expecting when final outcome comes? What specifically do I want out of this negotiation? Second thing is, if I want certain things, where am I now to define your standpoint? Third is, when you have a final settlement, what are you going to see, hear, or feel when you have the final outcome of the negotiation? Apart from that, the outcome also will indicate that when you get a feel that yes, I have got what I wanted to. How will you know that when you have it? Then you can ask this question also, what will this outcome get for me or allow me to do that, whatever I wanted to? These are some of the questions which will help you in negotiating the final outcome. Whatever outcome comes, is it only for you or the other party also? Is it ecological, beneficial to all the people or the stakeholders around? And for what purpose you wanted this negotiation? So you ask all these questions to yourself. But one of the most important things before starting a negotiation is many of us presume certain things which may or may not be correct always. For example, you can choose to accept when we negotiate with others. For example, I would like to read the presuppositions and decide if you agree it, would it be a convenient assumption to believe during a negotiation? Because these presumptions are existing with both the parties. And without accepting those presumptions or not accepting, whether that will impact on your thinking and the behavior you might choose to display when you negotiate with others. So here comes the negotiation skill. Once you presume something and assess this, your stand and the other party stand, how are you going to negotiate? So your negotiation skills also tries to depend on the outcome you are envisaging. And these outcomes are judged on three criteria. What are those three criteria? First is it a wise agreement? Whatever agreement we ultimately make a deal or close, is it a wise agreement? Number one. Number two, is it efficient agreement? And the third is whether, in spite of all the thing, if you arrive at an agreement, is it going to damage the relationship between the two parties? So these criteria should be always kept in mind when you are envisaging an outcome out of a negotiation. So what is a wise agreement? Let us try to understand what is a wise agreement. Wise agreement is the legitimate interest of each side to the extent possible. It's not that if I am standing in position one and the other party is here, both without any adjustment, you cannot reach with any kind of agreement. So to the best possible extent, what if the legitimate interest of both the parties are met, then that is a wise agreement. Second is, it tries to resolve the conflict interest fairly. That means there is nothing hidden. Things are transparent. Both parties develop a kind of trust with the other and the conflict is resolved. Third is, that agreement should be durable for a longer time, not a short-term thing. And finally, it takes the community interest into account. Second thing, what is a principled negotiation? When you talk of negotiation, there are certain principles you have to follow, and those are the basic four elements in a principal negotiation. What are those things? First thing is separate the individual people from the problem or the issues. Don't ever confuse people with the problem or individual from the issues. Okay, don't confuse between them. Separate them. Focus on the interest, not the position of the other party. What are their interests and what are your interests? Focus on that. Third is try to invent or explore options for mutual gain, not for the gain of any particular party or individual. And the fourth one is always insist on objective criteria. I'm sure all of you must be understanding the difference between objective and subjective, right? So always try to be objective in terms of criteria, which can be measured, which is visible, which is not left to any person's understanding or perception or emotion or whatever it is. So here you have to understand the people problem when you are trying to negotiate. And in the people problem, there are three categories which should be kept in mind always. What are those three categories? One is the perception. What is their understanding? How they perceive the issue? And what is their mental map? That is one. Second is, what is the status or the state of emotion of those people involved in the negotiation or in the conflict? And the third is how their communication is structured. Are they able to communicate, put forth their thoughts before you clearly or not? Okay, because many times what happens, you think something, you perceive something, but you are unable to transmit your thoughts to the other party properly because of improper or unstructured communication. So these are the three categories of people problem which normally one faces in a negotiation system. If you use the neuro-linguistic programming communication model, look at this model here. Here what happens, where you have some internal representation, your emotional states or physiology, but there are many filters through which you accept or ingrain the external triggers. For example, what are the filters? Time, space, matter, the energy, the language used, your own memories, or your decision-making capability, or some decisions you have taken in the past, then your values and beliefs and attitudes, and different meta programs, all those things. So all these external events or the input given by the other parties get filtered through all these things and they come to your internal representation. Okay. And there, based on your state of emotion or your physiology in terms of your body language or in terms of your communication structures and other things, you start behaving accordingly. So by this process, your negotiation process goes on. The first stage in a negotiation mechanism or system is planning. And I'm telling you, if you devote 80% time in planning a negotiation, other things will be a very easy and very smooth activity when it comes to working out that plan. Hardly 20% of your time and energy will take place and you'll have a fantastic negotiation outcome. So what goes into planning in the negotiation? First of all, determine your outcome, what you are expecting. Develop as many options as possible to achieve that outcome and what are the possible areas of agreements. Identify those outcomes and interests from all those options you have explored, and then identify those issues which are going to be resolved, and for that, develop external standards to judge options. And finally, you determine your partner, that is your best alternative to an agreement. Then once you have made the planning, then you start working on that plan. That is the negotiation process. So how to open a negotiation process? First is establish a rapport with the other party or individual. Get consensus, because always there should be a basis for negotiation. Third is establish the other person's outcome through as a frame. That means you start questioning or discussing as if this is a situation, how are you going to proceed? So like this, use this as a frame and get into a resourceful state or anchor the state, whatever situation you are, grab that and based on that, move thereon. How are you going to build a rapport? It is a process of building and sustaining a relationship of mutual trust, harmony, and understanding. Thereby, you go through matching the access cues from the words the other party utters, or from their eye movements, or from their body language. So you have to study all those things very minutely, and then you try to match or mirror the other person by physical mirroring or your body posture or your voice modulations or your speed or level of breathing and blinking of eyes also. So these are the signs, but how you do it, there lies the art of negotiation. So here you can use those VAK or the visual, auditory, or kinesthetics as you speak in the NLP parlance. So VAK is use of predicates or those predicate phrases of each of the representational systems. So if you look at the auditory aspect or the verbal aspect, you can use these things so that it can create a great impact on the other part. For example, in the auditory aspect, if I could tell you a way in which we could, the potential benefit or the values, then you would at least want to hear about you, wouldn't you? So if you does this kind of statement, I'm sure the other party will be interested and they'll budge from the initial step. Another way also you can put it, for example, so if this sounds good, we can go ahead and discuss how to do it, can't we? So these are the things auditory, that means the verbal way you can put. Second thing is visual. Same thing, if you twist and show them the way. For example, if I could show you a clear way in which we could, you would at least want to look at it, wouldn't you? Or, so if this looks good to you, we can go ahead and focus on how to do it, can't we? So there are simple twists which can be turned towards visual aspect. Similarly, to the kinesthetic aspect, if you make a twist, if I could help you get a hold of a concrete way in which we could, you would at least want to get a feel for it, wouldn't you? Similarly, so if this feels solid to you, we can go ahead and farm up on how to do it, can't we? So these are some of the simple examples of how you can use this science of VAK in the negotiation processes. Apart from this, the auditory digital way also can be, for example, if a person talks to other party, they'll want to know if your proposals make sense. So what they will do, they will try to memorize by steps, the procedures or the sequences, how they'll exhibit the same characteristics of the other representative systems. For example, when you discuss in the negotiation process, so you try to use those VAK, and there are certain key words, if you can use them, that will have a great impact. For example, sense, experience, understand, think, learn, process, decide, motivate, change, consider, perceive, distinct, conceive, know. So these are some of the words which can create a lot of impact. during a negotiation process. Look at this negotiation continuum. For example, here is a person A or a party A with their ideal state, and here is a B, and this is the gap or the bargaining area between them, and this is the continuum within which you can play the game of negotiation. Suppose both the party doesn't budge from their initial position or stance, it leads to a deadlock. But if they try to move from their initial level or initial ideal and to certain meeting point P, then you try to discover what is the meeting point or to what extent both the parties can budge from their initial stance. So during the negotiation process, there is always an exchange between the two parties. There are different state areas of agreement who can be brought into. And wherever you see a state area of agreement, try to anchor every state you can use later. For example, those kind of words or gestures of others, you try to capture. And in this process, you have to state what are the issues that can be resolved and what are the possible outcomes in those areas for this agreement. Then you try to develop different options, which includes both the parties' outcomes, because you have to remember what are the shared agreements. And if there are some shared agreements, what can be the preference among various options you are exploring, and what are the objective standards you want to measure and come out with, which are unambiguous and very clear. And based on different options, you get an agreement on what is the best option. Close on it, summarize, and agree to jump into the next step. But there lies the art of negotiation. You have to use different tactics. For example, whenever you get a proposal from the other party, immediately don't respond to the proposal with a counter proposal. Never do that. Always try to restate or validate or clarify or probe into that proposal which you have got from the other party. Number one. Number two, always try to avoid any attack or defense exchanges. Whatever the outcome comes, try to probe into that. What can be the reason behind that attack? As I said in the beginning, don't target the person, but what is the problem? In a negotiation process, avoid value judgment. Don't try to nudge a proposal and saying that it's ridiculous. No. Don't label suggestions or questions. Rather, you suggest that let me offer a suggestion. So, which is a positive way to approach. Whenever you discuss to give more strength or credibility, use I am going to offer you this. Right? And whenever you say something, state the reason. Whatever you want to explain, do that. Explain, then move forward. And in the process of negotiation, always try to accumulate maximum yeses from the other party and anchor on them and then move next. In the negotiation process, minimize the reasons you give when stating a proposal. Suppose you are giving a proposal, don't try to justify. Okay. While giving, you try to understand the other party's testing and summarize. So you think that this will work or this will not work. So that way you try to engage with them. And if required, tell the other your feelings if it is required of. Then always try to use what and how questions rather than asking why questions. And if you really want to close, then close it conditionally. For example, if you ask this statement, so if I did this, would you do this? So there you will come to know whether he or she, the other party, agrees to what you think. Then in the negotiation framework, you can use different frames. Different frame means different kind of statements so that you get the best response. For example, a question of negotiation frame like this, what can we both agree on? Or you can use an agreement frame, I appreciate, I respect, those can be the thing. Or you can use the purpose frame, for what purpose? Or there is a technique called what if. So if, what would happen if I do this? If I offer you this, like that. Or you can also at times pose a contrast frame. How is this difference going to affect you? If I am saying this, you are saying that, how is this going to affect you? Or at times, the backtrack frame also helps. Suppose he is saying something and you are not agreeing. So you want to double clarify by asking, so you are saying that this will happen if we do not accept, right? Like this. Or the same thing can be put in another way, that can I summarize what I understand from your statement? So like this. At times also you can use as if frame for creative problem solving. Like what would be like if, or can we suppose that? So these type of questions can be used. Another is the ecological frame. For example, how will this be over the long term? Or who else is going to be affected? So these are some of the frames which you can use in negotiation process. Another important aspect is the chunking. Chunking means moving from one specific to the general. For example, what is the intention behind this behavior? So this is called chunking up from specific to general. Similarly, from a general to specific, it is called chunking down. For example, same thing. What other behavior would also satisfy this intention? So you can chunk up from the specifics of the disagreement to something you can both agree on. And unless you find a shared area of agreement, the negotiation is doomed. But once you have that shared idea of agreement, you can chunk down to smaller issues in the light of that common agreement. So always it is better to chunk from a general to specific, so that once you agree with smaller specific aspects, then that will help you in arriving at a general agreement. So chunking up will help you to get agreement. You can ask for what purpose, or what is your intention, or what is this an example of. So that will help you in getting an agreement. But to chunk down, you have to chunk down as quickly as possible to maintain an agreement by asking questions like, what specifically do you want, or how specifically, right? So that way, the chunking helps in negotiation process. So in a negotiation process, always you should try to get into a bargaining area. And the settlement depends on your bargaining strength or your skills as a negotiator. So there, the art of negotiation comes here. How skilled you are, how you can move from somewhere to somewhere, from position A or B to C or D, how you can limit your worst case or breakpoints, and how we can seek the authority to move the limit from the initial position to a closer distance. And at times, as I said, certain times you have to agree to disagree. So some decisions you have to deliberately postpone so that you seek a fresh instructions. Because many a times when you are in a negotiation, you do not have all the power or authority to close it. So there are some bosses over you, some authority over you, from whom you need to get clearance. So at times you have to postpone a decision, deliberately agree to disagree, so that you take their clearance to arrive at a negotiation. So ultimately, a successful negotiation has to be timely and effective with the parties, and it has to produce an agreement that results in a resolution of the conflict and a revitalized team process. And the negotiation process should improve the relationship between the two parties or the individuals and strengthen the team of the two organizations. So to have a great negotiation skill, one should have a 8-step approach. What are those? First is prepare, then argue with yourself by visualizing all possible counter questions that may come. What are the signals you can give? How are you going to propose? What is the package you can offer? How you can bargain with the other parties? And in what way and where you have to close and agree. So that are the 8-step approach. So ultimately, negotiation skills lies that when you are negotiating, just to summarize, separate the team members from the issues, separate the persons from the problems, articulate your own objectives and the desired outcome of the resolution of the issue. Always try to listen to everyone who are involved in the negotiation process, and wherever you need to discuss on those specifics of the issues, and always try to acknowledge the other person's point of view. Ultimately, you have to get the yes, and that is the useful strategies. If you have not read this book, Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Murray, so please go to it. It's a fantastic book on negotiation skills. So if you really want to get yes, some of the useful strategies are as follows. Focus on the problem, not the person. Focus on requirements, not positions. Emphasize always on the common grounds and be inventive or creative, thinking out of box for all possible options. Manage your emotions. That's very important. You should not get aggressive. You should not fight. You should not be emotionally overwhelmed. And in the negotiation process, never ever react to the other parties. Always try to respond. And then whatever agreements you arrive at, make it clear, lucid, and long-lasting. Thank you so much for your patient hearing. I would love to take some questions if you have any. These are my contact coordinates, and if any of one would feel to have any further input or have any issues or questions or any developmental need, please feel to contact. These are my contact coordinates. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Shrikant. Any questions from you also?
Thank you, Dr. Das, for the very, very informative and very lucid way of explaining the negotiation. In fact, it needs two separate say time slot. One is for art, tactics, and the practices, and the other one is the scientific say behind it, science behind the negotiation. So I have some quick questions. So as a HR person, you must have negotiated with different say labor union, external parties, government agencies. So usually, how many sittings or how many meetings are required to say close the or to have the positive outcome out of the negotiation?
Yeah, a very interesting question. You see, to arrive at a settlement, you cannot have a one set standard formula of number of sittings. It
Correct.
depends on the issues.
Correct.
It depends on the parties. And
Correct.
there are some issues which exist for decades also. For
Exactly.
example, I'll share my experience with Paradip Phosphates. When I took over as head of HR of Paradip Phosphates, the first meeting with my MD, when I asked him, sir, what are your expectations from me as the head of HR? So by jotting down, he said that Suvendu, the wages of the regular employees have not been revised since last 10 years. And the wages of the contract laborers have not been revised since last 12 years because the company was in losses. The company was under BIFR. We had limited authority, the limited budget. So there were a lot of constraints. And there are many challenges in the company, within the HR team also. But he said that try to arrive at a settlement within 6 months. And you won't believe my target date was 31st of March 2009 because I took over on the 1st of October 2008. So I had a window up to 31st of March 2009. When during the process of negotiation, I did a lot of homework with my HR team, and I also attached some of the finance members also in that team. As I mentioned in my presentation about the exploring various options. So I had worked more than 30 options. And whenever I used to sit with along with my team before the union, I used to operate the computer and I used to make a PowerPoint presentation. And for the unions, they were totally amazed and were in awe that how come a HR head, he is crunching numbers, coming out with facts and figures which they had never imagined.
Correct, correct.
And
correct.
they got really carried away by that impact, and subsequently they were bound to come out with some suggestions on what we threw at them.
Right.
We offered some, we anchored at some situation, and we got their point of view, and we got hold of that, and from there we moved on. And I can tell you, hardly in a span of 6 months, we might have had 9 or 10 sittings. And on 24th of March 2009, in the wee hours of early morning around 5:30, we signed the agreements. And the settlement was such that the unions also never had imagined that management also is going to settle beyond something which they had anticipated.
Excellent.
And they said that, sir, after the settlement, we had never imagined that the management will suffer. We had never expected so much. So that's how you can, and the other thing which I mentioned, that you have to take the confidence of your boss, who's the approving authority.
Correct.
If the boss has total confidence in you, you can really arrive at a very win-win situation.
Yes, yes. Another short question, because our students are listening to this program, whether there is a age group while taking this role as a negotiator, whether any fresh graduate joining as a assistant manager in HR department can take this high responsibility of a negotiator, or there is a age group who can take this job?
I would say it's not the age factor, rather how competent an individual is in terms of KSA, knowledge, skill, and ability.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Whether they have all the knowledge relating to negotiation, whether they have the requisite skill to negotiate, and whether they are able or capable of negotiating. Correct. There are people in my team who were helping me in crunching numbers, using those Excel sheet, working out different options, and they were also being present, and they were also involved in interacting in a discreet way with the opposite party to get their feedback, because negotiation is a strategy, and yes, strategy is just like a war, you know. Correct. So you have to get inputs from various sources so as to chalk out your strategy also.
Yes.
Because those opposite party, we should talk to them in individual. They will rather give you suggestions how to make, but which they cannot openly say in a open forum. So that way, younger guys also can be involved.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Dr. Das, many thanks for this very rich content talk on negotiation, and I'm pretty sure that our student and teacher will be immensely benefited out of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Namaskar to all.